Football's back.
You are Locked On Cardinals, your daily Arizona Cardinals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Cardinals, your team every day. Alex Clancy here. Follow me on Twitter at Clancy's Corner. Follow the podcast at Locked On AZ Cards. Thank you for making Locked On Cardinals your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcast and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. So, voluntary OTAs today. Storylines aplenty. I'm going to agree with Michael Bidwell something. And I'm not used to that. And it's really going to kind of put some context into the growth and maturity of Kyler Murray. For those that have listened to this podcast every day, or if you've been around since 2017, thank you. If this is your first listen to this podcast, thank you. Welcome. Maybe make tomorrow your second. I have been in the camp that Kyler Murray is not the problem and that the previous regime didn't set him up for optimal, positions to be successful or as successful as he could be through his first 4 years in the league. And that's not to say Kyler Murray is perfect, without fault, has work to do, because all three of those are definitely true. Kyler Murray was at voluntary OTAs today. I mean, I'm going to dive into it from a contractual, angle, as well as a foundation building angle. Okay. Number two, there were two players who were not there today, both of whom may not be Arizona Cardinals next year, in Budda Baker and DeAndre Hopkins. And then finally, Derek Anderson, former Arizona Cardinal, for a year. He had some not so nice things to say about the Arizona Cardinals when he was here. And it's, it just puts perspective even more into how much needs to change. And while, it's going to be a slow evolution, it's just a constant reminder of how others view this organization, players, employees, people who don't play. I mean, just across the landscape of the NFL. And it's just something that needs to be touched. I'm not going to do it to beat up Cardinals fans, not doing it to beat a dead horse in the fact that, yes, we all know the report card that came out this offseason pertaining, to players, former players, current players, and grading all 32 teams in various categories. But it just needs to be mentioned. Now, as we look at OTAs today, you saw familiar faces there. Zaven Collins, Isaiah Simmons. Kyler Murray was on the sideline, obviously not playing because he's still rehabbing injury. But one part of his contract was as such where he makes $1 million for a workout bonus this year. Okay. Where he has to be present, he has to be there for a percentage of the games or of the practices and workouts, whatever it is. And while this is like, well, why do they have to give him a bonus for him to show up? That's not what I'm talking about. There's plenty. I think most contracts have workout bonuses in them. But for Kyler, I think that when this contract was put together, and then there was the film study clause that leaked. I don't know if the Cardinals did that or if somebody else found it. Somehow Ian Rappaport found it. I feel like Michael Bidwell did it the right way because it put into perspective what they expected from him off the field. And it's not necessarily to embarrass him, Kyler. It wasn't to say, hey, this is the reason why the Cardinals haven't won. You're not doing enough. I think what it did was it put a young man in a position to maybe see from a different angle what others may have seen. Now, that's, again, not to say Kyler Murray doesn't work hard. It's not to say he's a bad leader. Like, there's a lot of just things that float out around him, which I don't agree with. But he's a work in progress. Well, 4 years in. So how is he a work in progress? Tom Brady was a work in progress until year 2. I mean, everybody is. And with this new regime, I think it's massively important that Kyler Murray stands next to head coach Jonathan Gannon and GM Monty Ossenfort with a unified front saying, you know what? Things are going to be different now. So even though $1 million for this year is a drop in the bucket to what he's making, okay? If he didn't want to be there, maybe he would just blow off the $1 million bonus. But I think the genius in what Michael Bidwell did was he showed Kyler a different way in explaining this is what is expected of you. And what's going to come of it is Kyler Murray growing as a leader. It's going to happen through osmosis. It's going to happen inherently. He's going to be around his teammates more. And while this sounds like some sort of backhanded segment against Kyler Murray where it's like, well, he should have been doing that already. Or, what if he doesn't want to be like, that's not his style. He's more of a, he's not a partier. He doesn't like to be in public. Okay. What Michael Bidwell facilitated with this big roster workout bonus was kind of forcing Kyler out of his comfort zone in an effort to be a part of his team more. And they're voluntary for a reason. Nobody's going to talk about vets not showing up to voluntary workouts, especially the early ones in May. But I think, and I don't know if he did this on purpose because Michael Bidwell doesn't get a lot of credit for doing a lot of things rationally or functionally, but the byproduct of it could be Kyler Murray, while being out of his comfort zone a little bit more, that could in turn bear massive fruits for this organization moving forward, especially with the clean slate that they're building from. Locked On Cardinals, your team every day. 2 teams, 2 players were not at voluntary OTAs today. DeAndre Hopkins, Budda Baker. What does it mean? Anything? Nothing? Let's hit it next. Locked On Cardinals. First, though, this episode of Locked On Cardinals is brought to you by FanDuel. Okay. It's very simple. You make a fast break to FanDuel during the NBA playoffs. Okay? Because right now, new customers can get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's $1,000 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. If you're not aware of the entity that is same-game parlays, FanDuel has got you covered with that. Take $5. You can do over-unders on a bunch of different things. LeBron James points, Anthony Davis rebounds, Nikola Jokic assists, Jamal Murray threes, things like that. Parlay them. If you hit them all, you win. I mean, FanDuel has you covered for so many other things. Futures. Who's going to win the NBA championship? Go to FanDuel. We're getting down. I mean, both series are 3-0 right now. I mean, you could put a wager pretty much on anything as it pertains to the NBA. And that's why you need to make a fast break to FanDuel during the NBA playoffs. There's no better place to bet all the playoff action than America's #1 sportsbook. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. Again, FanDuel.com/lockedon for a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. Voluntary OTAs are here. It's just one of those check marks where it's like, okay, next thing to look forward to, June 1st, where there's going to be some moves made for the Cardinals, you would think, if Budda Baker and DeAndre Hopkins both aren't happy. There's no resolution there because the Cardinals will save some cheese post June 1st, whether it be a trade or otherwise. And then you go through list season, where the Cardinals are going to be at the bottom of the list for a lot of them, but there'll be things to talk about. And then around the corner, you got mandatory minicamp, OTAs, and we're off and running in the 2023 season. But starting right now, Kyler Murray at voluntary OTAs, whether he's getting paid or otherwise, it's something that sets a precedent that needs to be there if the Cardinals are going to win with Kyler Murray at quarterback. Teamwork, cohesion, leadership. You can lead by example, like pretty much every star in the history of Arizona sports. It's always been really a lead by example guy. Larry Fitzgerald was lead by example. Paul Goldschmidt, Shane Doan, lead by example. So something needs to change, and it's slowly starting to. And I commend Michael Bidwell for leveraging this as such, to where you hope that if he shows up more, it'll be just inherently more easy for him to become that true bona fide leader that people are now clamoring for, especially with all of the, mishaps, bad situations the Cardinals have been in over the last 18 or 24 months. Neither Budda Baker nor DeAndre Hopkins were at voluntary OTAs today. DeAndre Hopkins is reportedly in Canada working on his body. He was on the I Am Athlete podcast with Brandon Marshall, and he said something to the effect of Josh Allen. Well, Brandon Marshall goaded him into he just put it on a silver platter and was like, hey, who would you want throwing you the football if you could choose? And he mentioned Josh Allen first. He mentioned a couple other names after. I don't even fault the Cardinals really with this. The wide receiver market just went away. And DeAndre Hopkins, sure, hasn't been healthy the last couple seasons, had the PED suspension in the first 6 weeks, but I feel like every single Arizona Cardinal fan, media member, etc., knows wherever he goes, he's going to be a beast. So that's why I've been and it seems like if Kyler Murray were healthy for week 1, I don't think this would be a conversation. I feel like they would have extended him, Hollywood Brown, Kyler Murray to the moon. Rondale Moore, Greg Dortch, Zach Ertz, James Conner, Trey McBride, they've got pieces. But I don't think, and this is something that, I've gone back and forth on because, I've said all offseason, extend DeAndre Hopkins, give him guaranteed dollars, front load it so he can be placated this season, which is going to be potentially not so fun in the win-loss column. And then in 2024, he will have made money for his services. And then, when everybody's healthy, then you can kind of position this in a much more positive outlook for DeAndre Hopkins to be an Arizona Cardinal. But now it's he's going to be 31. Okay. If he's got 5 years left in the league, you don't want to give up 20% of that on a lame duck season. So I understand his thoughts behind that. He's never Houston had some playoff success. I think they won the division a couple years in a row. But then he had guys like TJ Yates throwing him the ball in the playoffs, I believe. So it just wasn't ever Deshaun Watson tore his ACL that year. DeAndre Hopkins has never really touched potential Super Bowl greatness. And there are teams in the NFL that are ready to do it. The thing that sucks about the Cardinals is they're not going to get anything back for him if they trade him. They cut him. At this point, you take what you can. You try and get a player back. It's a tough situation. So him not being at OTAs, it makes sense. It's kind of the writing on the wall. I knew the writing on the wall was probably there anyways. But instead of saying, nope, he's not going to be on the team, it's so much more fun and beneficial, intellectually, at least for me, to think of ways where DeAndre Hopkins is going to be in the future for the Arizona Cardinals, because he's a top 10 wide receiver in the league when he's healthy. Doesn't matter that he's slow. Now, Budda Baker, on the other hand, it's interesting because, this is going to tell a lot. If I were Budda Baker, I wouldn't go to voluntary minicamp either. At this point, they're going to have to extend him or he's not going to be an Arizona Cardinal. And I think that I've said it multiple times. I'm going to continue to say it. If this is your first podcast, thank you. And I will catch you up on what I've been saying since, 2.5 months ago when I called this, that if they don't extend him, he's going to want out. It's a win-win. Win. You get your leader back. You add a couple years, so he's happy. He stays in Arizona Cardinal. And in the long run, you're saving money anyways. Imagine what Budda Baker could be with a good defense in front of him and not having to fill holes for a lack of talent in the cornerback room, which has been a massive issue recently. Linebacker, pass rush. Like, there's no strength on the defense for the Cardinals aside from Jalen Thompson and Budda Baker. So why wouldn't it be a no-brainer just to give him money? It's not like, well, it sets a precedent for other stars. What other stars do the Cardinals have? It's not bending over backwards. It's actually fulfilling on something that Monty Ossenfort said one of the first things out of his mouth, that every Arizona Cardinals would be like Budda Baker. It's like, how good is your word then? And, that's something that I don't understand why they haven't done it already. I don't understand it. So while he's not there, okay, I think this is it's a much bigger deal than DeAndre Hopkins if you're going to weigh out the two, but it's also one that's solvable much more than DeAndre Hopkins. So do I see, resolution-wise, who has a better chance of being an Arizona Cardinal next year? It's Budda Baker, because there's a clear roadmap to it. And it's not strong-arming an organization. It is saying, you know what? I'm the most important non-quarterback player on this team. You say that everybody should be like me. Why would you not pay me for that? And again, he has 2 years left on his deal, so it's not like they're going to give him a 5-year deal. He probably wants more guaranteed money. Just give it to him. It's Budda Baker, because if you think DeAndre Hopkins, and everybody has this collective idea that DeAndre Hopkins is going to ball out elsewhere, you put Budda Baker on any defense in the NFL, it's like, what are we doing here? You're just going to watch. I said this on Thursday of last week, and I'm going to continue to say it again. The trend that needs to change in Arizona is star players getting rooted for by hometown fans in Arizona on Arizona teams, and not what comes out of people's mouths. You know what? Good for Paul Goldschmidt in St. Louis. Good for Calais Campbell in Baltimore and Jacksonville. No, that trend needs to change. The Cardinals need to keep their star players and show them how they care by giving them the contracts they deserve. It's as simple as that. Derek Anderson. Huh? Yup. Next. I mean, hey, I'm Alex Clancy, Locked On Cardinals, your team every day. When Derek Anderson comes across my Twitter feed, he was an Arizona Cardinal for 1 year. Okay, he was in Cleveland and then Carolina. And this was from Sir Yacht, the Hard Knocks podcast, Cleveland. He had Derek Anderson on. Derek Anderson pretty much said he had to pay for food. He had to pay for water. When he was going to sign with Carolina after leaving the Cardinals didn't even file the paperwork to cut him in time for him to be able to sign. Like, this was in 2010, okay? So what this is just kind of a refresher, a reminder of what it's been like, not just the last couple years, but the last 15 almost, if not longer. So this is what it's been for the Cardinals. And when I get pushback on, no, that's not how you do things. You know what? Not how you do things as it pertains to changing the way the Cardinals do things. Like, you know what? The Cardinals should try some wrong. Try the opposite of what they've done for the last 50 years. And maybe they'll see different results. Maybe they'll see players who actually want to play here. Maybe they'll see players who actually want to re-sign here. Maybe they'll see players from free agency who are like, you know what? I want to go play there. Maybe they'll get more than 0 primetime games. Maybe try some wrong. Try something different. And for all of you Cardinals fans who've been around for 50 years and been a Cardinals fan forever, open your eyes to the opposite of what you've had to endure for the last handful of decades. And maybe, just maybe, embrace the opposite of what the Cardinals have done up until this point. Alex Lindsay, Locked On Cardinals. I'll talk to you tomorrow.